are so glad you joined us, and what could be more fun than to be in the home of Norma Turnage. And we are going to learn a lot about you, Norma, and thank you so much for letting us come.
Well, I'm flattered to be here, and I'm not sure what you're going to learn, and I hope it's not going to be anything that I'm going to regret.
No. Well, we'll cut that out if you do,
good.
so
That's
just
good.
feel free to talk about whatever you want to.
Yeah.
But I don't think a lot of people know a lot about you, and I know you were born in Rocky Mount. You have a rich history with Josh Bullock Barbecue. I want you to kind of take us back to your parents and what it was like growing up when you did, and you lived in Edgecombe County, right?
I did. And my father always liked to cook, and he would cook pork in the backyard in a pit, and that's how his restaurant began. It started in a building that was about the size of the room in which we are sitting, and I can remember lines on the outside on the weekends when he would be cooking, and you could just smell that pork all over the neighborhood, and people were lining up to come and get the barbecue. And as the years went on, he enlarged that facility to incorporate a place for people to sit, and then later on went into the banquet business. And that became his staple. And my mom worked right along with him. And they had, on Sunday, they had a buffet. And then during the week and at night, they did banquets and sit-down service. But they had the first political rally in eastern North Carolina in that restaurant.
Wow, who were the politicians?
It was Beverly Lake. I don't know if you remember him or not, but he was running for governor. And later on, they had a rally for Jesse Helms. And it was a most interesting time to watch that business grow and to see the people who came through and the types of entertaining that went on in that facility.
Did you and your sister help out?
Not really. That was not my calling. But we grew up sitting in the kitchen and eating cornbread, I can tell you that. We had wonderful cooks, and they took us under their wings. And Janet and I would come in after school and sit in the kitchen, and that's where we would get our supper. And it was just a wonderful family. The people who worked there, the cooks, my mom and dad, it was a wonderful way to grow up, to tell you the truth.
On Cokie Road, right?
On Cokie Road, that's right.
And when did it cease to exist?
After my mother died, my father was there for a while, and then he had heart problems and he died. And Fred and I tried to keep it open because we had some great employees. And we, at the same time, were bottling our Josh Bullock's barbecue sauce and distributing it in many grocery stores across the eastern part of the state. And so in order to keep all of it going, we tried to keep the building open and serving, and it just became too much. Fred was trying to be mayor and practice law, and I was trying to raise children and do whatever else I was doing, and neither of us happened to be restaurateurs, and so it just became the most expedient thing to close the facility. And I don't know if you remember, during those years, that was probably before 1980, that many churches were going in and buying buildings up instead of building a traditional church. And we had the opportunity to sell it to a church, and so we did.
And what is it now? What church is there still a church located there?
It is still, but I don't know the name of the church, to be honest with you. It does not have a traditional denominational name, I don't think, but it's still operating. It is.
Well, did you run with the barbecue sauce for a while yourself?
I was not trying to sell Josh Bullock's because we had patrons who were buying Josh Bullock's. We had wholesalers who were carrying that for us. But it was back during one of the times that I was dieting, which I did many times. And I thought that we needed to have something that did not have any cholesterol or any sugar in it. So, I don't know, decided to do my own. And Genevieve Batchelor and I had this great vision that we would develop a barbecue sauce. We called it silhouette sauce. And so we found the distributors, and we found manufacturers, and that was the one that I tried to sell. And that lasted for a little while, but it was too difficult to get in the market. And, you know,
A lot of competition.
well, it has to do more with warehousing than it does anything else, and how to get it on the shelf. Because you need to be able to stock the shelves yourself, and most of the time in groceries, you give them 3 cases if they're going to buy 4. And so it's a difficult kind of thing.
Yeah.
And particularly in the big warehouses, it becomes an economic issue. We had not made enough money to do that, and so we decided we would pay off our loan at the bank. We had learned how to do a business plan by that time, and so that was the end of Silhouette Sauce.
Well, you spoke of Genevieve Batchelor, and I think of the years that it was y'all were together. Every time I'd see one of you, I'd see the other, and I guess part of that came from initially trips y'all took because Fred was the mayor and Bill Batchelor was the city manager.
That's very true. Genevieve is older than I, and so we did not know one another in high school or even after I went to college and she went to college. And although we both grew up in Rocky Mount, we still had not run into each other. And after Bill came back to work for the city, and back then it was necessary to attend some of these meetings, and so that's what we did, and we traveled together some. And a lasting friendship developed, and she's still a very good and very dear friend.
Well, let's talk about your career, because I heard through talking to friends that you were the cutest 6th grade teacher at Brownsville that anybody had ever seen, and that every boy in your class had a crush on you.
So. I'm not sure about that, but I did have a very interesting teaching career. It was fun, and I was able to meet a lot of the parents, of course, and developed a lot of friends. But I came back to Rocky Mount when Fred finished law school, and he joined a firm in Rocky Mount, and I came back to Bassett School. And it was so interesting because I had learned just enough French that I could teach maybe 1 or 2 songs. Well, Heavenly Days, they thought that was the most unusual thing you've ever seen. And that was my first point of popularity, of being able to teach a French song. And then my children came along, and I went over to Brownsville School and taught 3 years. And that's where I ran into some of those young guys who, but you know, we had a principal then who was very creative, and I don't think schools are run this way anymore, out of necessity, of course, but the state did not pay for secretarial help, and we had to put on a show every year in order to raise money to pay for the secretary. And so Lily Sharon was the principal at Brownsville, and she loved the drama. And we ended up putting on Rodgers and Hammerstein every year. And so these kids were they were talented, they were fun, and we had fun together.
Well, and you, speaking of singing, I didn't realize till talking to some of your friends that you were in the choir at Lakeside, and you were in a lot of Tank Theater productions, and in fact, Hello Dolly, among others.
Music Man.
Music Man.
The Music Man. Yes, I was Marion the Librarian. I was. Oh, that was great fun. We performed in what was then the old R.M. Wilson Auditorium, which is probably the most perfect auditorium that's ever been built in Rocky Mount, acoustically speaking. It was a magnificent place to be able to perform. But yeah, I did some of that.
Did you ever get family members in there with you to?
Heavens, no.
No. I could see little John and Trevor in there.
No, we never did that. But I tried to. Well, Ida Stanley was the pianist, and Ida was probably one of the most talented women I have ever known at the piano. And Ida liked to create scenarios for shows and so forth. And she did get Fred to do the sheriff's part out of the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas one time. And I did not know he was doing that. And we came out on the stage, and here comes Fred in his red, white, and blue shirt and a cowboy hat. I almost fell off the stage. I've never been so shocked in my life. But we used to do a lot of that kind of thing. I think that may have been for, I don't know, it may have been a Chamber of Commerce function. But we were over here at Gateway. And those days were great fun, and music was a big part of my life.
Absolutely. Well, and your kids then, you lived in Inglewood area so they could walk to school, right? But I think Trevor
Correct.
told me that she moved all around. I mean, that was back in the day before neighborhood schools, so she actually went all over Rocky Mount in school.
Well, you know, we had neighborhood schools, and then they were caught up in the first crosstown busing, is what it was. And Inglewood School and Baskerville were paired. And when we were in Inglewood School, when they were at Inglewood School, when we were in that area, John was going to Baskerville and Trevor was going to Inglewood. And she's right, after that you go to junior high, and then you go to another division, then you go to senior high finally. But
well, how wonderful for you that John and Trevor have stayed here, and you've had the joy of watching them be parents, married local. I mean, when they both of them married families that you knew ahead of time.
absolutely.
And talk about what that's meant to you.
Well, you know, I have thoroughly enjoyed being back home. I never thought that Fred and I would come back to Rocky Mount, but we did. And so we were here with our parents as they aged, and then when they finally died. And then we raised our children, and Trevor worked in Winston-Salem before she decided to come back to Rocky Mount, and John worked in Denver and Fort Lauderdale and finally decided to come back to Rocky Mount. And I just feel so blessed that they're here. And I saw their children grow up, so I've had my 5 grandchildren around me all this time. That's a real blessing, you know.
Well, and Olivia's back here now, too.
Oh,
so.
yes, I think she may be staying.
Great. We got to figure out how we can keep her.
Oh, I think we'll be able to keep her.
Okay.
She's got a boyfriend, so maybe that's
Wonderful.
going to do it.
Well, we need to be sure they keep getting along.
Absolutely.
Norma, with your having taught for a while, were you surprised when you were appointed to the State Board of Education? I mean, I've heard that's a lot of responsibility. I mean, did you not have to move up to Raleigh 2 or 3 days a week? I mean, a month?
No, I probably should have.
Oh, you commuted?
Yes, I did, and I drove a lot. I was at the time working for the Rocky Mount City Schools doing public information, and we were doing a little news clip that we sent out to the parents. And fortunately enough, I was working with a superintendent who believed in openness and letting information flow and making sure people were informed about what was going on in the school system. And we decided to release test scores, bottom line test scores from all of the schools. Well, when we did that, it caught the attention of Governor Hunt. And I received a call from him, and I started out, the first appointment I had was the Juvenile Code Revision Commission, when we looked at services for children and tried to initiate legislation that would enable services to integrate the information on children when they were in trouble. And coming out of that, there were several pieces of legislation, and like any other commission, a lot of it just went to the shelves. After that, I was appointed to a commission to move the community college system, which was at that time worked under the State Board of Education, to a separate board. And that was done, and during that time, I did receive an appointment to the State Board of Education.
For 12 years?
For 12 years, 12 years.
That's a real labor of love.
It was, but I will tell you, there were so many things, so many good things that came out of that endeavor at that time. We were the board that passed the legislation and the licensure for lateral entry.
Oh, good.
And Dick Spangler was our chairman, and he was a businessman
From
who
Charlotte.
believed in productivity, the bottom line, and that he felt that sometimes we got a little bit hung up on some of the minutiae of licensure, and that there were other ways of doing business, and as a result, lateral entry came about. But that was one of the primary things we did. And you know, it takes a while, and I did spend 12 years, and our meetings were every month for 3 days, and then you would go to different school systems during the month. But it was well worth it. I saw a lot of things evolve. I saw a lot of good things go, and I saw a lot of things reversed after I came off the board. One of the big lessons you learn is you are not indispensable, and regardless of what it is, the pendulum is going to swing, and you're probably going back where you were to start with after you get through.
The good thing I found having on the school board, though, there was a time where people built consensus. You didn't always win your point of view, but it was important that you were there to give your point of view.
I think that's very true, and the debate is sometimes even more important than the issue. The board at that time was, it was not quite as divided at the very beginning when I went in as it was at the end politically. But by the end of 12 years, you know, you're going to have a lot of evolving. And unfortunately, sometimes things are decided on a political basis. But for the most part, I saw people who wanted to work together, and the children of North Carolina was central in everything that they did. So it was a real privilege, and I met some wonderful, dedicated people and learned a lot from them.
And then how long was it after you went off that before you went on the North Carolina Community College Board?
Well, in between, I guess it was a year, maybe, I received a call to go on the Board of Trustees at UNCG, University in Greensboro.
Your alma mater.
My alma mater. That was a totally different experience. That school only meets 4 times a year, and most of the jurisdiction of the trustees in some of the university has to do with setting fees, deciding on architects, and where buildings are going. So most of the overall governance is going to come from the Board of Governors. And it was frustrating because on the State Board of Education, you're making decisions on testing, you're making decisions on cutoff scores. You decide on how to license a teacher and what a teacher has to do. But on that particular board with the trustees, it was so generic, and so much of the decision making I felt was done at the country club before I ever got there. So 6 years was enough there, and I enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, and I believe so strongly in our university system, and they do such a good job. The Board of Governors does a good job. It was just a different discipline in participating on the Board of Trustees as compared to the State Board of Education.
And if you hadn't been on the State Board of Education, you probably wouldn't have realized.
I would have never known it. I would have never realized it, no.
Well, so then it was after that that you were appointed to the North Carolina Community College Board?
That is correct. And I guess maybe it was a couple of years after that that I went on the Community College Board. And the Community College Board operates similarly to the State Board of Education. You meet once a month, and you deal in programs, what is taught at the local level. Now, in the community college system, you have a jurisdiction from each of the individual community colleges. It's a more autonomous kind of organization. With the State Board of Education for K through 12, it is more central, and you have policies sent down from Raleigh instead of the local institution being able to enact a lot of the things that they do, because the philosophy in the community college system is that that school is organized to meet the needs of a community, and the needs in Guilford are not the same as they are in Carteret. and so you have a lot more flexibility in decision making. But at the same time, the way the Community College Board operated was still much more similar to the State Board of Education. It was quite an interesting experience. I felt that during the time I was on the Community College Board, or when I started, that the community colleges really the board had not found a real focus. Mm-hmm. And during that time, we had excellent leadership from committee chairs as well as from the state president, where it became an opportunity where students can come in and find life work to enable them to either get a job or to further their education in the university system. And it sort of gelled in its purpose and in its focus.
And it's
it was
just
wonderful to
taken
see
off
that.
now. I mean, what a pivotal time to be there. And I would think people now, with watching the agreements with colleges and the community, that be given an associate degree and getting your first 2 years there, and adult education. I mean, it's just such a gem. I want to talk about your traveling. Among your friends, they just said that you and Fred had some marvelous trips, that travel was very special to you all.
Well, we did. We had a really good time. And now Fred liked to cruise because he felt like he could go ahead and pay everything right up front and he didn't have to deal with it anymore. He did not like not to know what was going on, but we were able to see a lot of things and go to a lot of places. And it was quite a journey. It really and truly was.
Did your kids go with you on any of them, or was this after they grew up?
This was after, well, most of it was after they were grown. But I think the first time we ever went to Europe, we went on a trip by invitation from East Carolina, and they had a program abroad, and we were there as guests of the German government.
Wow.
And it was at a time that NATO was also meeting. As a matter of fact, I remember when the guests for NATO moved into the hotel, we were on the floor that they were supposed to have. And they warned us that when we went out that day, when we came back, instead of going to floor 9, we were to go to floor 10. And we came back in, and every hairbrush, every bottle, every pen, everything you had been transferred to another floor, and it was put in exactly the same place. It was an eerie experience. But we felt really fortunate to be there with such a dynamic a group of people, and it was our first trip, and you know, you just don't forget those. That was really special.
Well, and you went to the National Democratic Convention one time too, didn't you?
Went twice.
Twice? As a delegate?
No, I went one time as an alternate, and one time as a delegate. And
McGovern, I think, was one of them.
That was the McGovern Convention. And most of the business was done from 1 until 4 in the morning.
Whoa.
And they had their big parties at 7 in the morning, and I was young and naive, and I really had never seen anything such as that. And how those people walked the next day, I do not know. But that was interesting. Here again, you know, one of the things that I have been so blessed with in being able to be involved in public service, and this is a lesson that I would like to see other people, other young people learn, that it's not only an opportunity, but I think it's also a responsibility to be involved in those entities that give you so much. And our communities and our government and our boards do so much for us in our quality of life, and it's very important, I think, to give back. But in addition to that, you get so much out of it. Yeah, you see different places, but you meet different people, and it's just a privilege to be a part of what's going on around you.
Well, and Norma, I want to mention you have been the Chamber Distinguished Citizen.
Oh, well.
The Boy Scouts gave you their Distinguished Citizen Award, and so deserved, because you indeed are a role model for so many of us. And I do want your grandkids who are staying here and other people to think, I can do this. I can get involved in areas, especially if they're one where you have an interest, like you said.
They can, and I hope they do, because that's going to mean the difference in the quality of life that we all have in the future.
Well, you have enhanced our quality of life, and we are so grateful for you.
You are so kind, and thank you.
Thank you
very much.